Alright, a very good afternoon, students, and today we start the second chapter from your text Snapshots titled The Address by Margot Minko. Alright, now this is a very simple yet touching story about a girl whose life has changed due to war. She's a Jew. And as you know, during the war, the Jews were excommunicated by the Germans. And how her life has changed, how it has affected her, is what we go through in this story. It is about her search of her past glory, or let her search of her past life, which was happy, and how she reacts when she actually comes face to face with the past that she wanted to reconnect with so badly. Right now, without giving up any spoilers about the story, let's just go through the story. The Address by Margot Minko, story about a girl in a post war era. Do you still know me? I asked. The woman looked at me searchingly. She had opened the door a chink. I came closer and stood on the step. No, I don't know you. I am Mrs. S.'s daughter. She held her hand on the door as though she wanted to prevent it opening any further. Her face gave absolutely no sign of recognition. She kept staring at me in silence. Perhaps I was mistaken, I thought. Perhaps it isn't her. I had seen her only once, fleetingly, and that was years ago. It was most probable that I had rung the wrong bell. The woman let go of the door and stepped to the side. She was wearing my mother's green knitted cardigan. The wooden buttons were rather pale from washing. She saw that I was looking at the cardigan and half hid herself again behind the door. But I knew now that I was right. Well, you knew my mother? I asked. Have you come back? Said the woman. I thought no one had come back, only me. So the story itself begins in a very strange way where our narrator, the girl in the story, has been knocking at the door and the door is being opened by a woman and she says, do you know me? I am Mrs. S's daughter. She doesn't, even the name of the mother is not revealed, and later on you'll see that even the name of our the girl who is telling us the story, her name is not revealed as well. So when she says, do you know me? I'm Mrs. S's daughter. The woman who was at the door, she said, no, I don't know you. And she was just showing her face, all right? Her body was being covered by the door. And so the girl thought, all right, she doesn't know me, so maybe I am mistaken. Maybe I am at the wrong address. Because that was such a long time ago, and I had met her only once. So it is very much possible that I have made a mistake and I have come to the wrong house. But just then, the woman who was at the door, she moved to the side and her body could be seen, wherein our narrator noticed that she was wearing her mother's green cardigan. Alright, ule usko mother ko cardigan chini ale, which the woman was wearing. So now she was right. Alright, I was right. I am at the right address. You knew my mother. And now the woman couldn't hide the fact, alright? Now she couldn't lie anymore because she's wearing a mother's sweater. So she said, have you come back? And the girl said, no. How, have you come back? I thought no one had come back. The woman, now she cannot lie and she says, so you're back. I thought no one was back. And the girl says, only me, alright? I'm the only one who's back. So continuing with the story, a door opened and closed in the passage behind her. A musty smell emerged. I regret I cannot do anything for you. I have come here specially on the train. I wanted to talk to you for a moment. It is not convenient for me now, said the woman. I can't see you. Another time. She nodded and cautiously closed the door as though no one inside the house should be disturbed. I stood where I was on the step. The curtain in front of the bay window moved. Someone stared at me and would have then asked what I wanted. Oh, nothing, the woman would have said. It was nothing. I looked at the nameplate again. Darling, it said, in black letters on white enamel, and on the jamb, a bit higher, the number 46. As I walked slowly back to the station, I thought about my mother, who had given me the address years ago. It had been the first half of the war. I was home for a few days, and it struck me immediately that something or other about the rooms had changed. I missed various things. My mother was surprised I should have noticed so quickly. Then she told me about Mrs. Dorling. I'd never heard of her, but apparently she was an old acquaintance of my mother, whom she hadn't seen for years. She had suddenly turned up and renewed their contact. Since then, she had come regularly. Every time she leaves here, she takes something home with her, said my mother. She took all the table silver in one go, and then the antique plates that hung there. She had trouble lugging those large vases, and I'm worried she got a crick in her back from the crockery. My mother shook her head pityingly. I would never have dared ask her. She suggested it to me herself. She even insisted. She wanted to save all my nice things. If we have to leave here, we shall lose everything, she says. Have you agreed with her she should keep everything? I asked. As if that's necessary, my mother cried. It would simply be an insult to talk like that. And think about the risk she's running each time she goes out of her door with a full suitcase or bag. So now that the woman has been confronted with the truth, she cannot lie to the girl. So she said, all right, you are back, fine. But then I cannot do anything for you. And the girl, our narrator, says, well, I just want to talk with you for a few minutes. And the woman says, no, all right, this is not the right time to talk. Maybe some other time. And then she closes the door very gently so as to not let anyone inside the house be disturbed. And as she was turning back to go home in the train, all right, now she has relocated to a new place, she saw that somebody was staring at her from the curtains of the house. And she thought to herself about the conversation they would have. All right, Ulemon Mone socho, what conversation they will have. The person who was staring would ask the woman, who is she? And she would have said, it's nothing. It was nothing. And now she has to make the trip back to her house wherever she is living at the present moment. And while she was walking back to the train station, she started thinking of the past, wherein she had first met the woman at whose house she was now standing at. That woman's name was Mrs. Dorling. All right, it was the first half of the war. Some world war was going on, and as you know, the Germans were very ruthless towards the Jews. And she was home for a few weeks. And as soon as she reached the house, she noticed that a lot of things were missing from the house. And the mother was surprised as well. And she told the daughter that Mrs. Dorling, who was a friend of her mother's, all right, she was safekeeping all their valuables, from the silver cutlery to the antique vases to the plates, anything that held materialistic value which was expensive was being kept by Mrs. Dorling for safekeeping, because they might have to leave their house as the Jews were being persecuted, and Mrs. Dorling most probably is a German woman. And so she will keep it safe, mother says. And she even says that I did not even ask her to keep it safe. She suggested it, she offered help. And the daughter was a bit skeptical, all right. Did you tell her that she will keep everything? And the mother says, oh, don't be silly, all right. I cannot disrespect her like that. She is helping us. Just think about the risk she's taking by just walking out of this house every time she visits with a suitcase full of expensive stuffs. My mother seemed to notice that I was not entirely convinced. She looked at me reprovingly, and after that we spoke no more about it. Meanwhile, I'd arrived at the station without having paid much attention to things on the way. I was walking in familiar places again, for the first time since the war, but I did not want to go further than was necessary. I didn't want to upset myself with the sight of stress, streets and houses full of memories from a precious time. In the train back, I saw Mrs. Darling in front of me again, as I had the first time I met her. It was the morning after the day my mother had told me about her. I had got up late, and coming downstairs, I saw my mother about to see someone out, a woman with a broad back. "This is my daughter," said my mother. She beckoned to me. The woman nodded and picked up the suitcase under the coat rack. She wore a brown coat and a shapeless hat. "Does she live far away?" I asked, seeing the difficulty she had going out of the house with a heavy case. "In Marconi Street," said my mother. "Number 46. Remember that." So, as she was thinking about all this, she had reached the train station, and all this while she had not paid any attention to all the sights and sounds that were around her, all right, because it was all a part of her past life. She used to live in that neighborhood. Everything, all the sights and sounds around that area was a part of her memory, all right, of her past life, and she did not want to relive that. She did not want to go through reliving those memories. And so she sat on the train to go back to wherever she was residing at the moment, currently. And as she was traveling in the train, she once again started thinking about the past, wherein she remembers seeing Mrs. Darling for the first time, that is, the day after when her mother had mentioned about how Mrs. Darling was keeping their valuables safe. So she saw a woman with a large back, and the mother had introduced Mrs. Darling to her, and Mrs. Darling had just nodded, and she walked out with a big suitcase. Seeing, all right, our narrator saw that she had trouble walking with the suitcase. It was quite a big suitcase. And so, out of conscience, she had asked her mother, "Does she live far out? The suitcase seems very heavy." And the mother had then told her Mrs. Darling's address. She had told her daughter, "In Marconi Street, house number 46." And that is how she had remembered where Mrs. Darling lived, and that is how she was able to reach her place now that the war was over and could have a normal life. And now we know why Mrs. Darling was avoiding her in the first place. Because उनीहरूको जति valuables थियो, जति expensive items थियो, antiquesहरू थियो, that was being kept by Mrs. Darling for safekeeping. Remember that, alright, for safekeeping. And most probably she doesn't want to return it, and that is why she is avoiding. I had remembered it, but I had waited a long time to go there. Initially, after the liberation, I was absolutely not interested in all that sorted stuff, in all that stored stuff, sorry. And naturally, I was also rather afraid of it, afraid of being confronted with things that had belonged to a connection that no longer existed, which were hidden away in cupboards and boxes and waiting in vain until they were put back in their place again, which had endured all those years because they were things. But gradually, everything became more normal again. Bread was getting to be a lighter color. There was a bed you could sleep in unthreatened, a room with a view you were more used to glancing at each day. And one day I noticed I was curious about all the possessions that must still be at that address. I wanted to see them, touch, remember. After my second visit in vain to Mrs. Darling's house, I decided to try a second time. Now, a girl of about 15 opened the door to me. I asked if her mother was at home. No, she said, my mother's doing an errand. No matter, I'll wait for her. So she had always remembered that address, but she had taken a long time to actually go there. Because once the war had ended, she did not want to be associated with her past life. All right. It had brought her nothing but misery. The war had left such a bad impression on her mind about her past life that she did not want to confront it at all. But as time went on, she got comfortable with a new life. And one fine day, she wanted to relive her past days, all right? The time that she had spent with her mother, the time they had spent at their own house. So now she felt that she was ready. She thought of all the things that was being kept by Mrs. Darling, all those things, all right? Forget the materialistic value, forget that they were expensive stuffs. To the narrator, the girl in the story, all those things were a part of her past life with her mother. All right, it was a part of her life. उसको monetary value संग she has no attachment. The only thing that she wants to be associated with regarding those things is their emotional value and not their monetary value. And so as things got better, she one day decided that she would go and visit Mrs. Darling and see all those things. Now, first attempt was unsuccessful because Mrs. Darling told her that I cannot talk to you now, maybe at a later date. So now she went there for the second time. And this time the door was actually opened by a 15-year-old girl, maybe Mrs. Darling's daughter. And she told her, my mother's not here. She's at work. She's running an errand. And our narrator told the girl, I will wait for her. I followed the girl along the passage. An old-fashioned iron Hanukkah candle holder hung next to a mirror. We never used it because it was much more cumbersome than a single candlestick. Won't you sit down? Asked the girl. She held the door of the living room and I went inside past her. I stopped, horrified. I was in a room I knew and did not know. I found myself in the midst of things I did want to see again, but which oppressed in me the strange atmosphere, or because of the tasteless way everything was arranged, because of the ugly furniture or the muggy smell that hung there. I don't know, but I scarcely dared to look around me. The girl moved a chair. I sat down and stared at the wooden tablecloth. I rubbed it. My fingers grew warm from rubbing. I followed the lines of the pattern. Somewhere on the edge there should be a burn mark that had never been repaired. My mother will be back soon, said the girl. I've already made tea for her. Will you have a cup? Thank you. I looked up. The girl puts cup ready on the tea table. She had a broad back, just like her mother. She poured tea from a white pot. All it had was a gold border on the lid. I remembered. She opened a box and took some spoons out. And so, now this time she went inside the house. She said, I'll wait for your mother. And the girl opened the door for the sitting room, all right? And as she was entering the house, the first thing she noticed was an iron Hanukkah. Now, Hanukkah is a multiple candle holder, all right, which is used by the Jews. And she saw that and she remembered that that belonged to them, right? And as she went inside the living room, all right, which we call sitting room, where guests are seated, The door of the living room was opened, and as soon as she stepped inside, she was stuck because she was now in a place which she knew and did not know at the same time. Why is that? Because the entire room was being decorated by all the things which Mrs. Darling had taken from her mother for safekeeping. So she saw everything, all right. उसको जत्ती possessionहरू थियो मदरले मिसेस डर्लिङलाई देखेको, everything was being decorated there. And she found it very strange because that is the thing that she wanted to see right in the first place. She wanted to touch it, she wanted to feel it. But then, now it did not bring her the kind of emotion that she thought it would because it was in a strange atmosphere. She saw the tablecloth and she remembered that the tablecloth was theirs. She knew that there was a burn mark along the tablecloth. The Mrs. Darling's daughter, who had a broad back just like her mother, she offered tea, and the girl said thank you. And as the tea was being poured from the white teapot, she remembered that as well. That belonged to them. And just to cupsहरू निकाल्यो, spoonsहरू निकाल्यो, she saw everything and she remembers that all those items belong to them. That's a nice box. I heard my own voice. It was a strange voice, as though each sound was different in this room. Oh, you know about them. She had turned round and brought me my tea. She laughed. My mother says it's antique. You got lots more. She pointed round the room. See for yourself. I had no need to follow her hand. I knew which thing she meant. I just looked at the still life over the tea table. As a child, I had always fancied the apple on the pewter plate. We use it for everything, she said. Once we even ate off the plates hanging there on the wall. I wanted it so much, but it wasn't anything special. I had found the burn mark on the tablecloth. The girl looked questioningly at me. Yes, I said. You get so used to chatting all these lovely things in the house, you hardly look at them anymore. You only notice when something is missing because it has to be repaired or because you have lent it, for example. Again, I heard the unnatural sound of my voice and I went on. I remember my mother once asked me if I would help her polish the silver. It was a very long time ago, and I was probably bored all that day, or perhaps I had to stay home because I was ill, as she had never asked me before. I asked her which silver she meant, and she replied, surprised, that it was the spoons, forks, and knives, of course. And that was a strange thing. I didn't know the cutlery we ate off every day was silver. The girl laughed again. I bet you don't know it either. I looked intently at her. What we eat with? She asked. Well, do you know? She hesitated. She walked to the sideboard and wanted to open a drawer. Look, it's in here. I jumped up. I was forgetting the time. I must catch my train. She had a hand on the drawer. Don't you want to wait for my mother? No, I must go. I walked to the door. The girl pulled the drawer open. I can find my own way. As I walked down the passage, I heard the jingling of spoons and forks. So inside the strange room, when she opened her mouth to speak, she could not even recognize her own voice. And the girl continued talking to the narrator. Right? She told that this thing's mother tell me that these are antiques. We even eat off the plate which is hanging on the wall. Then she even showed her a still life. Now, still life is a painting or a drawing of reproduction. All right. In this case, it was a reproduction of a fruit on a plate. All right. The painting, she recognized that painting as well. Now, she sees everything that she wants to see, but she cannot connect with any of those items. She finds it very strange. As she opens her mouth to speak, she does not recognize her own voice as well. And she starts talking to the girl. She tells the girl about a point in time where she was home, all right? Maybe she was sick, maybe it was an off day at school, but her mother had asked for her help to polish silverware. And the girl didn't know what silverware the mother was talking about. And it was then the mother had showed her the forks, the knives, the spoons, and it was then that a narrator had known that what they were eating of every day was silver cutlery. So, which shows that they had a pretty comfortable life financially. All right, the plates, no, sorry, the spoons and knives and forks that they used were actual silver. And so she asked the girl, "So, do you know what cutlery you eat of? Do you know if it's silver?" And then the girl goes to check upon it. But then our narrator suddenly remembers that she had a train to catch. She says, "I cannot stay." And the girl says, "We can't, will, won't you wait for mother?" And the girl says, "No, I don't have any time left." And she walks off. And as she is walking out of the house, she could hear the jingling of knives and forks, which the young girl made while opening the drawer where the cutlery was being kept. At the corner of the road, I looked up at the nameplate. Marconi Street, it said. I had been at number 46. The address was correct. But now, I didn't want to remember it anymore. I wouldn't go back there because the objects that are linked in your memory with the familiar life of former times instantly lose their value when severed from them. You see them again in strange surroundings. And what should I have done with them in a small rented room where the shreds of blackout paper still hung along the windows, and no more than a handful of cutlery fitted in the narrow table drawer? I resolved to forget the address. Of all the things I had to forget, that would be the easiest. So now we know why our narrator felt very strange when she came, or rather when she found what she was actually looking for. We know from what we have read that she wanted to reconnect with all the items that was being kept by Mrs. Darling because she thought that it was a part of her life. She wanted to touch those items. She wanted to feel those items. She wanted to relive the memories that was associated with those items. But when she saw the items being decorated at Mrs. Darling's house, it did not bring her the emotions that she thought it would bring out in her. She realized that anything which one holds dear, all right, which is close to one's heart, कुनै चीज अगर हाम्रो, if we value it, it is because it is in a particular place, right? It is because it is in a particular place. If you move that thing of value to another place, then it does not bring in the same emotions. उसलाई के भएको थियो, त्यो जति वासहरू थियो, प्लेट्सहरू थियो, त्यो चाहिँ उसको घरमा सजाएको थियो पहिला, all right, in her life where she used to live happily with her mother. But those things were also associated with war, which also like के याद आयो, war को बारेमा पनि याद आयो, all those things. Now if that things were still decorated उसकै घरमा त्यसरी राखेको भए, it would have brought her happiness. But seeing that all those items in a different place, Mrs. Darling को घरमा सजाइ राखेको, she could not find the connection. उसलाई त्यो कनेक्सनै फिल भएन. अब पहिला जस्तो उसको घरमा त्यो सामान राख्दा कनेक्सन भइरहेको थियो, त्यो चाहिँ मिसेस डर्लिङको घरमा राख्दाखेरि she did not feel that connection. And like I said, उसलाई त्यो चिजहरूको मटेरियल भ्याल्यु, मोनेटरी भ्याल्यु, कति बेच्दा कति पैसा पाउँछ, राख्दा कति हुन्छ, त्योसँग she had that was not the reason for her trying to reconnect with it, because she was now living in a very small apartment, all right? If ulai monetary value ne chako bha, she could have taken all those things, sold it off, and had a bit better life, because she herself says that she lives very frugally, all right? She has little things on which to live by. But she is happy there. She is comfortable there. Now she can connect with those things. अब उसको त्यो नयाँ घर नै उसको लागि घर हो. उसको त्यो जति कम्ती फर्निचर छ, जति कम्ती कटलरी छ, that is a part of her life. And now she does not want to go back and remember those things. And she finally says that I don't want to remember Mrs. Darling's address, Marconi Street, house number 46, is the address or is the thing which will be very easy for me to forget, and I don't want to remember it back ever again. Alright? So, on that note, the story ends. It is so basically it is a story about one's search for one's past, a failed attempt of reliving the life that she had, only to realize that that part of life is now lost in history, that she cannot relive it. उसको memories में जुन चाहिँ त्यो imprint थियो त्यो life, that is no longer there, and life has to go on. Now please go through the text as well. Any difficult words that come across, please underline it and find the meaning of it as well. And if there's any part that you may have trouble with, then please do let me know. I'll be more than happy to explain it or clear any doubts that may arise. All right, now until the next class, please stay home and stay safe, and please do go through the text. Thank you.